over 75 years, one organization has operated deep in the shadows of global politics. But how did the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, go from a scrappy Cold War startup to the data-driven powerhouse it is today? Well, we're going to dive right in and find out.
You know, this quote really nails it. The CIA was built from the ground up to be a ghost. The whole idea of a black budget, that's money that's completely off the books. It tells you everything you need to know. Secrecy isn't just part of the job, it is literally in its DNA from day one.
So to really get the CIA, you've got to go all the way back to the beginning. The world had just finished one massive war, World War II, but almost immediately a totally new kind of conflict started brewing, a quiet one, a Cold War, fought not with armies, but with secrets and spies.
And what's crazy when you look at this timeline is just how fast everything happened. I mean, World War II ends, and President Truman immediately shuts down America's wartime spy agency, the OSS. He figured, hey, the war's over, we don't need this anymore. But then, boom, the Soviet threat just explodes across Eastern Europe. Truman realized America was completely blind. He had no idea what Stalin was up to. And so, out of that sheer panic, really, the CIA was created just 2 years later.
Okay, so you've got a brand new spy agency. What's the first thing you need? Money. Lots of it. But you can't exactly put funding secret coups in the federal budget, right? So they got creative. They hit the funding inside the Marshall Plan, you know, that huge program to rebuild Europe. They just skimmed 5% right off the top. We're talking $685 million. That's an insane amount of money back then. It basically gave the brand new CIA an unlimited, off-the-books slush fund to get started.
So, armed with a boatload of cash, the CIA jumps into the ring. The problem? They were total rookies, and they were about to go head-to-head with the undisputed heavyweight champions of espionage.
Yeah, this really paints the picture, doesn't it? On one side, you've got the KGB. They were the gold standard, decades of experience, ruthless, disciplined. And on the other side, the brand new CIA. It was a total mess. It was so full of Soviet moles that one of their own reports called the agency fatally penetrated. It was a disaster. Almost every single agent they sent behind the Iron Curtain was caught or killed almost immediately.
The agency was getting desperate. They needed a win, badly. And they found it in Iran in 1953. Get this, a single CIA officer, a guy named Kermit Roosevelt Jr., goes in with over $1 million. He starts bribing officials, paying protesters, spreading all sorts of propaganda, and it actually worked. He single-handedly overthrew a democratically elected prime minister, all to protect Western oil interests. This operation, Ajax, basically became the CIA's textbook for how to run a coup.
But that playbook, it didn't always work. In fact, it led to maybe the most famous, most public failure in the agency's history, the Bay of Pigs. The plan was to overthrow Fidel Castro in Cuba. It was an absolute, unmitigated disaster. The invasion force they trained got crushed in a matter of days. The whole world was watching, and it was just a searing embarrassment for the United States.
And President Kennedy was absolutely furious. I mean, you can hear it in his quote, "How could I have been so stupid?" He felt completely misled by the CIA. And this was a huge lesson for the White House. They learned the hard way that this whole game of human spies and secret armies, it's messy, it's unreliable, and when it goes wrong, it's politically radioactive.
So, the CIA had a serious problem. They just couldn't win against the KGB in the traditional spy game on the ground. So what do you do when you can't win the game? You change the rules. They decided to pivot hard. They leaned into the one thing America did better than anyone else, technology. It was a shift from relying on spies to relying on machines.
And the crown jewel of this new tech-first strategy was this plane, the U-2. It was an absolute marvel of engineering. I mean, look at this. It flew at 70,000 feet, so high that Soviet jets and missiles just couldn't touch it. And the cameras on board? They were so insane they could take a picture of a 2-foot-wide object from 13 miles up in the air. For the first time, Washington had these eyes in the sky that could see deep inside the Soviet Union. It was a total game changer.
Then the Berlin Wall falls, the Soviet Union collapses, and suddenly the Cold War is over. For the CIA, this was a massive identity crisis. Their number one enemy for 40 years was just gone. What were they even for anymore? But then a new threat started to emerge, a totally different kind of enemy, one without a country, without an army, driven purely by ideology. And this new threat would force the CIA to completely reinvent itself all over again.
You know, the 90s felt relatively calm, but it was really just the quiet before the storm. You had these escalating attacks by al-Qaeda, embassies, the USS Cole, and then 9/11.
That one morning changed everything. Suddenly, the CIA had a new, absolute mandate. There was no more ambiguity. The mission was simple: find the people who did this and destroy them.
And one of the first big moves in this new war on terror was to make the case against Iraq. I think we all remember that moment. Secretary of State Colin Powell stands up in front of the entire world at the UN, and he lays out this mountain of intelligence, all pointing to one conclusion: Saddam Hussein was hiding weapons of mass destruction.
So based on that intelligence, the invasion happened. Baghdad fell pretty quickly. But then, as U.S. troops started fanning out across the country, searching all the suspected sites, a really troubling question started to hang in the air.
And the answer to that question was, there weren't any. The weapons of mass destruction just weren't there. The search turned up nothing. The intelligence was flat out wrong. It turned out to be this massive, catastrophic failure based on bad sources, a lot of wishful thinking, and political pressure. And that failure left a huge black mark on the CIA's reputation for years.
So how do you fight an enemy that doesn't have an army, doesn't have a country, and operates in the shadows? The CIA had to adapt again, and they did it by embracing two revolutionary tools that would come to define 21st century warfare: the drone and big data. First, the drone. The Predator and Reaper drones were a complete revolution. Think about it. You take a surveillance plane that can loiter over a target for hours, and you strap a Hellfire missile to it. All of a sudden, you have the ultimate remote killing machine. A pilot sitting in an air-conditioned container in Nevada can watch, track, and eliminate a target on the other side of the planet in Pakistan or Somalia. It created this whole new type of warfare, one that was called cleaner, faster, and cheaper because you weren't risking a single American soldier on the ground.
But as powerful as the drone was, the CIA's ultimate weapon wasn't a missile. It was data. Through its own venture capital firm, a company called In-Q-Tel, the CIA was an early investor in a Silicon Valley software company called Palantir. And what Palantir's software could do was almost like magic. It could sift through billions and billions of data points, phone calls, bank transfers, drone video feeds, you name it, and find hidden connections a human analyst would never see. It could link a cell phone in Afghanistan to a bank account in Hamburg. It was like having a crystal ball. It didn't just let them solve conspiracies, it let them predict them.
Which brings us pretty much to today. The war on terror, at least as we knew it, has faded as the central mission. The world has shifted under our feet yet again. And now, the CIA is staring down a whole new landscape of threats, new rivals, and battlefields that don't even exist in the physical world.
And this chart really lays out the evolution perfectly. It's not about one big enemy like the Soviet Union anymore. Today, the agency is fighting on multiple fronts at once. The battlefield isn't a country, it's cyberspace and the world of information. And the weapons aren't just spies and planes, but AI and data analysis. The core challenge has gone from containing one big slow-moving superpower to trying to anticipate dozens of fast-moving threats from all over the globe, including peer competitors like China.
So when you look back at its entire history, what's the one constant with the CIA? From being forged in the fires of the Cold War to mastering drones and big data, it's the agency's incredible ability to reinvent itself. It adapts to survive. And that leaves us with the big question as we look forward. And this new era of AI, cyber warfare, and powerful new rivals, how is the CIA going to reinvent itself one more time?